Language is everything. Having a strong understanding of your native language is one of the major markers of how we view intelligence. Most people are intelligent by nature, curious by nature, but not everybody is educated. And so, what education gives you is the ability to articulate your intelligence, to be able to write down your ideas, and for people to be able to read the ideas that you write. So, it really comes down to literacy. So, now what does it mean to be literate? Okay, it means to be able to read and to write, or to decode a message and to encode a message. So literacy is basically the ability to take your thoughts, put them into words, to translate specific ideas. You also have additional layers of how you put those words together. Things like poetry and satire and sarcasm. And these are levels of the language that we want them to be able to analyze and find deeper meaning. We want them to have this very strong command of the English language. So our goal is for students to have a high level of literacy, but we set them up for failure. And the reason that is because we omit one of the key parts to understanding and building language. And that key piece is called etymology, the origins of words. And so without etymology, the students are shooting in the dark. They have no idea what connects one word to the next. So if you look at the hierarchy, we kind of start out with learning our ABCs, our 1, 2, 3s, our letters. Okay, they start to put those letters into words. Then they start to take those words and form them into sentences. Then they take those sentences, string them together into paragraphs. Those paragraphs become stories, and then the stories become books. Now that makes perfect sense, but there's something missing. This is what it should look like. Once they have the letters, they need to take the letters and start to put together roots and then suffixes and prefixes so they can understand the building blocks of the words that they're dealing with. So what happens is they go right from letters and spelling right into words. That's a major leap, and it leaps over one of the most essential parts of the English language specifically, and that's etymology. So in order for you to have a strong command of the English language, and for you to be able to get to books and stories and poetry, and for you to be able to write paragraphs, essays, sentences based off of the words and the vocabulary that you're familiar with, you cannot leave out the roots, the suffixes and prefixes, and understanding how to put together words and how to decode words that you've never seen before. In reality, this is what the hierarchy looks like. It looks like they have this strong understanding of letters. They know the alphabet. Everybody knows the ABCs, but then they never really touch on roots. And then they don't know the meanings of all the suffixes and prefixes. And so when this is shaky, your words become shaky too. You got a handle of it, but it's not very strong. Now you can forget about putting together intelligible sentences and then writing a paragraph. Oh my God. They don't even understand the flow of how these things should go, or even how to put together sentences that are strong, that are direct, that have a flow to them, that lead into each other, and to write with fluidity and fluency. If you don't understand how to unpack the language to get the meaning that you need in order to be able to comprehend the paragraphs that you're reading, comprehend the themes within that chapter and what's being conveyed to you, you're going to be lost. And they know they're lost because they don't want to do it. They don't want to read the books. They don't want to read the short stories and tests. They don't want to write paragraphs, and they can barely put together sentences because they're always grasping for words that they're not 100% confident with. And that's our fault. It is absolutely imperative for every subject teacher to start to incorporate etymology. It makes everyone's job easier. As a third grade teacher, I'm counting on your first and second grade teachers to prepare you for my class. As a middle school teacher, I'm counting on that grammar school education. And by the time you get to high school, I am hoping and counting on the fact that your education leading up to this point has prepared you for what I have to offer you next. So the question is, how do we start preparing them? The first thing we have to do is prepare ourselves. Before you present vocabulary, you want to unpack that vocabulary yourself. Make yourself even stronger with the language so that when it's time to present it with the students, you already have an understanding of where it is you want to go. If the students don't fully understand what a word means, we will spend a day or two really unpacking one single vocabulary word. And the reason is language is power. A good example is when in my art class, I'll teach about gradients. Okay, so this is how to blend or fade while you're shading so you can create different levels. So usually when you present a new word to the class, you say, does anybody know what a gradient is? Raise your hand. Nobody raises their hand. Then eventually somebody raises their hand with a preposterous answer. Then I'll add other similar words. Graduate, gradually, grade. And then I'll highlight what they all have in common. I may ask, is there anything that these have in common? And then they'll say, oh, grad. Now they're starting to unpack the language. So ultimately, we'll end up with a definition of what grad means. Okay, so you graduate, that means you go to the next level or you to the next degree, graduated cylinder, so on and so forth. And then they start to really understand the words that they're dealing with, the components. So the key to this is to connect the term that you want them to know to terms that they already know. Bridging the gap is everything. To teach somebody one isolated piece of information that's not connected to anything else they know, anything else they've ever heard of, is a disservice. They are not going to remember it. The brain does not see it as relevant. It's essential that you make these connections. And these should be organic. Of course, you should have some ideas of words that are related, but let the class volunteer words and you filter them out. You filter out the ones that kind of have a close meaning. So another example, monotonous. So I'm trying to get the students to understand what monotonous means. So we put up other words that have mono, and then ultimately we figure out that mono means one. Then we put ton, words that also have tone or ton in it until they understand, okay, that must mean sound, so or voice. So now we're talking about one voice, unchanging, one way. And now it starts to make more sense, and it also solidifies the meanings of other words that they already have in their vocabulary that have mono in it. It connects them. One of the other great discussions that we have starts off with the word microphone. So I have them split the word up into the parts that look familiar to them. And they do this one successfully. They do micro and phone. Okay. And so I say, what's a phone? And then a lot of them don't even know that it's short for telephone. Okay, which is something, a different conversation altogether. But then once we have telephone, then we have television, teleport, portal, transportation, translate. Words start to link together by the roots. And so now they start to see the similarities and the connections between all of these different words that they were learning as sight words. So if you put telephone, television, teleport, those are completely unrelated words to them. In doing this, we start to unpack the meaning and figure out that tele means distant or from a distant. So if you teleport, you're going to distant doors. So television means to be able to see from far, distant vision. Okay. And so the reactions from the students are just amazing. I feel like I'm just unlocking mysteries and building new connections and strengthening the language each time. They're like, oh. And so that's a great feeling because now you've brought context to the words that they're learning. And so along with the vocabulary that I want them to learn, we also have a rolling list of etymological roots. Okay, so how many? Roughly about 25 to 30 within a school year. Okay, and so these are going to be the roots that are connected mainly with the vocabulary in my class or in discussions that come up in the class. Now, there's a list of roots that I use for my class all the time, but they should evolve out of your discipline. Now, once they know the roots, we get to play with the roots. We get to build language. So if you understand how language is broken down into its parts, then that means you can build it on your own too. So we start building words out of the roots that we have. one of the early words that we build from our short list of 10 to 12 etymological roots is autobiography. So then we learn that auto is self and bio is life and graph is to write or draw. So when you're doing an autobiography, you are literally writing about life yourself or writing about your own life. And so again, the light bulbs go off. They're like, oh man, oh my God. And we'll take those roots and we'll try to come up with words and come up with meanings. If we understand the system and how the language is built, who's to say that we can't create words on our own? So this was one from a class that we created, psychographology. Well, maybe I should say we thought we created, because initially what we do, we'll try to build a word and then come up with a meaning for it. And so the meaning for this one we came up with was the study of writing with your mind. So then we looked it up, and it actually is a word, and it's the study of actually handwriting, okay, and what that says about your personality. So it's really interesting how they stumble onto language and start to work with language in a way that is much more confident, much more assertive, much more active than just being told the meanings of individual words. Let's look at a few numbers. You have 180,000 words in the English language. Of those, you have about 60% or 108,000 that are from Greek and Latin origin. 60,000 words are in the adult vocabulary on average. And out of that 60,000, about 20,000 are in their active vocabulary. So let's take out the key numbers. You have 108,000 words that are from Greek and Latin origin that come from about 1,200 roots. Okay, so let's crunch these numbers now. So if we have 1,200 roots over 108,000 words, that gives us 1/90 when we reduce it. 1/90. That means for every one new root you teach students, you've unlocked the definition or part of the definition of 90 new words. Now that's a major bang for your buck. 1 for 90, I'll take that deal any day. Teachers are concerned about the long list of responsibilities that they have in the classroom in general. But teachers also know that when you have all of your students participating, all of your students engaged, and everybody functioning at a higher level, classes run more smoothly. So when you think about the efficiency of one new root empowering students 90 times over, you actually don't have to teach that many roots. In a normal year, we probably get to about 20 to 25 etymological roots. But I know the investment. I understand that those 20 new roots are potentially opening up 1,800 new words. And all it takes is being familiar, being solid, being confident in the meanings of 20 new roots. So what I want you to do is you're going to take the vocabulary list that you already have in your class and you're going to start breaking it down. You're going to start unpacking it. You're going to dig for the deeper meaning and decode some of these words for your students. Because with each root that you can decode for the students, you would have benefited them 90 times over. And that's the type of strategy that's going to empower our students to become more articulate and more literate.